The Iceman, Wim Hof, is someone I've been following for a very long time. And if you don't know who he is, look him up. He's incredible in the things he's been able to accomplish himself, but also in teaching his method to other people, a breathing method, breathing technique, where he teaches that to other people and gets them to do the same things that he does. So what was thought of as him being a superhuman. That's actually the first time I saw him when I was in high school, I think. So years and years and years ago on a Stan Lee program talking about superhumans. Stan Lee is the comic book writer and creator of a lot of the superheroes that we know. And they thought that he was just a freak. And that was what the show was about. And I thought he was a freak because he was running marathons in his shorts, barefoot in snow. And climbing Mount Everest and same thing. And so he was thought of as kind of like the superhuman, but now he's taught his method to so many people, and he's written a book called The Wim Hof Method and gone around the world speaking about it and teaching people to then teach other people about his method. And it's had great success with myself. Like I said, I've been following for years, doing his method, doing cold exposure work, and it's been fascinating. But one of the things that Wim Hof talks about is, and he often says, that the cold is his teacher. And I had thought originally this was because of a loss that he suffered. His wife committed suicide. She was struggling with depression. She committed suicide. They had 4 kids together. So it wasn't just a tough thing emotionally, as you can expect. It was financially tough. There was so much that went on, and he suffered a mental breakdown of sorts himself, and tried to look outside of himself for help, studying religious texts and doing all these different things. And he really found that getting into the cold water was the way that he could escape. And it kind of forces you to surrender when you're in the cold. And if you've ever done any cold exposure, ice bath, cold shower, those types of things, you'll know it's hard to focus on other things when you're in the cold. And so I thought it was more about that surrendering aspect. And I think that there is an element of that. But recently, I made a breakthrough, and I think that this is more in line with what he's talking about and how he created the Wim Hof method himself, with the cold as his teacher. So again, that teaching aspect. And what I noticed is when I'm in the cold, when I go in a shower, if I turn it from hot to cold, or if I just jump into cold water or do an ice bath, especially the first several breaths are like this unconscious, deep, full breath. And what I've noticed is I've used even things like the O2 Trainer by Bas Rutten. I'm going to talk more about that in another video, but these techniques and these tools that you can use to help strengthen the diaphragm and strengthen the muscles that open and close your chest cavity so that you can take in a big breath. And when you don't have exposure in my experience, when you don't have the cold exposure, you can't get as big of a breath. Now, possibly you can get equally big as breath, and you probably have to when you're doing something like sprints or interval work where you're expending so much energy in your body that you need to get that oxygen in. And the reason why I kind of differentiate the two is because what I'm talking about is when you're at like a normal state, when you're just trying to take in a breath. When you put a physical stimulus, when you start doing sprints, your body's going to automatically start taking in big breaths. You can't force yourself to take that big of a breath without that stimulus. So same sort of idea, but again, without having to do the sprinting, because that might be taxing and that might not be useful on a day-by-day, second-by-second basis. You need to take some rest in between doing that. The cold shows you and gets you to take that full breath better than anything that I've discovered. So when you get into the cold, you feel that cold and it's like, oh. And then the breathing that happens after that, the unconscious, just like I said, it forces you to take that breath. That is something that is so powerful. And like Wim is teaching me how to expand and take in that full breath. The Wim Hof method is where you take in a full breath and you let it out. You don't breathe it all the way out. You don't force it all the way out. You let it come all the way in and then you just kind of let it out. And that is what happens when you're in the cold. As long as you're not like just breathing through and just shivering, if you're taking full breaths, that is the Wim Hof method. Now, it's a little bit more extreme when you're in the cold because you're in an extreme environment, but that is a way to tap into your immune system, to tap into your natural body's ability to withstand the cold, because you got to remember, we haven't always had technology with heating and air conditioning and the clothing even that we wear. We've had to survive without that, and we've survived in areas that are very, very, very extreme. So this taps into this natural state of your body, and I think it is so healthy for people to take huge full breaths. And what I challenge you is to do a cold shower or to do some cold exposure like that, like an ice bath, and notice what happens to your breath. As long as you're not trying to force yourself not to breathe, if you're letting things come in and notice what happens, I bet that you'll find, very similar to the Wim Hof method, you'll take in a full, like gasping breath, like almost like you're gonna die. You need to take that breath, and then you won't be able to let it out all the way. You'll, and if you let that happen, if you don't force yourself, try to, to like not breathe like that. If you just let it happen, what'll start to happen is you'll start to relax. And the breathing will start to calm down, and the cold won't feel as cold, and it won't give you that shock feeling that you get when it first hits you. And this is that breathing technique that Wim Hof teaches. And what happens over time is you start to take in bigger breaths naturally throughout the day. Again, without the stimulus of the cold, without doing the method. When you do these things repeatedly, when you expose yourself to cold, when you do the Wim Hof method, you'll start to take in bigger breaths naturally. And what's one of the things that he talks about? It's going to decrease anxiety. It's going to help you find peace more naturally. Just like if you were going to meditate, just like if you're going to do other breath work, there's tons of breath work out there. I'm just specifically talking about Wim Hof in this video. And I think it's so powerful and so crucial that we take in these big breaths. But that's my challenge for you, is notice your normal breathing, right? Just how you're normally breathing. Try to take in a big breath. Take in a full breath, however it is that you can get it in. Then get in the cold and notice what happens to your breathing. And I bet you'll find that you'll be able to take in a bigger breath and it'll be more forceful. And again, it's this subconscious way, your natural body's ability to get that oxygen in, because it knows something that your conscious mind might not know. But again, if you're struggling with something like anxiety or depression, doing this and getting the breathing will help tremendously. Okay, so that's my challenge to you. Get in the cold. Notice what happens with your butt. Notice what's happened with your breathing. Also notice what happens when you get out. How you'll be much more relaxed. Because again, you're not in that kind of life-threatening situation. At least that's what your brain thinks. And if you expose yourself to that repeatedly, you'll start to see that the anxieties of everyday life that we often bring in a response of anxiety, of fear, aren't going to give you that same sense, because you have this base, you have this breathing, you have this exposure to these situations, and you understand how to breathe, and you understand that breath is life. And if you hold your breath, or if you don't breathe in fully, you're not going to be able to distribute oxygen and other nutrients to your body, but you're not going to give yourself that sense of calm. So again, challenge yourself, get in the cold, but also notice what happens as the exposure goes along, and as you get better and better at these things, notice what happens in your everyday life. So that's my challenge for you. That's what Wim Hof is talking about when he says cold is his teacher. I thought it was fascinating, but again, the more you do this stuff, the more breakthroughs that you're gonna have. I'm just sharing my journey with you. So thank you very much, and I'll see you next time.